the extraordinary thing is that now there's a huge public support for the idea that the prosperous should pay their fair share. Even the Tories are actually going along with it in a very shamefaced way. And only Boris Johnson is the only one that I've actually heard who said, "Well, no, it's an absolute disgrace." But unfortunately, they also agree on cuts in government spending, which of course will hit working people hard, and poor working people hardest of all. So the Green New Deal has been costed at between 50 and 70 billion a year, and the additional proposals that are in this pamphlet would add between 40 and 60 billion to that. So we're talking about finding something like 110 billion a year, which is around 5.5% of GDP extra. Now that sounds, a significant part of that would obviously have to be met by borrowing, which isn't an easy task. But the fact is that the press and the Tories make a huge fuss about the fact that in the coming year, that in this coming financial year, government debt is about to double from 40 to 80% of GDP, which sounds absolutely frightening. But actually, when you look at it, the USA and Germany are going, their debt levels are also going up. They're going up from 60 to 90% of GDP. And Japan is going up from 180 to 200% of GDP. And the ceiling doesn't seem to have fallen in on them. In fact, our debt was over 100% of GDP from the First World War to 1962. So an additional increase in our debt level of less than 5.5% of GDP is actually not too big a deal. However, essentially what we're saying is that this needs to be met by either taxation apart from borrowing, and we're already seeing, thanks to the huge levels of borrowing that the government has undertaken, basically to prop up failed financial institutions, that the first tremors about creditworthiness are going on. So we need to be talking about tax and cuts, because that's what politicians talk about all the time. So at the moment, as I said before, the poorest one-fifth of society in this country pay 36.6% of their 36.5% of their income in tax, while the richest one-fifth pay 35.5%. Said that it will produce next year, not this year. It will only on a temporary basis as well. So because they don't want to upset anybody, a 50% tax rate for incomes over £150,000. Now, I read a wonderful thing in the Scotsman about this. I said, I tried doing this with a Scottish accent, but I don't do it. So the Scotsman, so imagine an Edinburgh accent. There was concern that the higher tax band, which will cost £80 a week to people earning between £150,000 and £200,000 a year, gosh, will wreak havoc in the financial sector. Chris Sanger, UK Head of Tax Policy at Ernst & Young, said, the key risk in such extreme rates will, the key risk is such extreme rates will deter entrepreneurs and successful wealth creators from coming to Britain. Well, you know, if only we could have done it a bit earlier and got them not to come in the first place. So the reality is that while I once shocked somebody by saying in tax terms I'm something of a Thatcherite myself, because during her term of office the basic rate of tax was 33% and the higher rate was 65%. It's currently 20%, 40%. Brown cut it to 20 and 40. So suggesting that the rich should be taxed at the same sort of rates that Mrs. Thatcher applied would hardly seem to be Red Revolution to me. So there are a number of quite straightforward ways by which we could make tax both fairer and increase the tax take. So certainly the government could raise nearly 24 billion a year by introducing a new tax bands of 50% on incomes above 100,000, 65% over 250,000, 75% over 500,000, and abolishing the national insurance cap so that contributions are paid all the way up the income ladder. Second, minimal reforms to council tax. One thing that's been suggested is the introduction of land value tax at a very low rate could raise an additional 7 billion a year. In addition, if we stopped letting wealthy individuals stuff hundreds of thousands of pounds into tax-free pension funds, then we might find that new higher tax rates will be more difficult to avoid. So abolishing tax relief on pension contributions on incomes over 100,000 a year would generate an additional 4 billion a year or so. But over 15 times, as I was astonished to find this, that over 15 times as much is lost through tax avoidance at the top than to benefit fraud at the bottom. So I haven't noticed any adverts on the TV saying, "We're coming to get you, you rich bastards." It tends to be sort of single mums and so forth that they aim at. So the TUC's analysis says that it would be possible that something like 12 billion in tax is being lost from the 700 largest corporations and 13 billion by wealthy individuals, thanks to tax planning and avoidance schemes. So obviously we can. So there's something like 25 billion we could save by closing those tax loopholes, and so on and so forth, through a whole load of technical ways. One could actually raise something like 70 billion by adjustments to the tax scheme. One of the things that occurred to me is one of the proposals that the Green Party has suggested is that we should have an air passenger duty, which should be very dramatically increased, and that could generate an additional 9 billion. Well, I think that we could go beyond there and actually start to have a new system, basically, actually a system of rationing air miles, so that people who don't use their ration, and most people in this country don't. Most people in this country don't fly from one year's end to the other. So you could actually get a bonus for not flying.